welcome to day 5 of our Cloud Run journey. In this video, we are just going to look at an example of how we can use environment variables and secrets in Cloud Run. Right. What I have here is basically a simple application where you can upload some document and then ask AI questions about it. Right. So let us just visit the application and try it out. So I can go ahead to upload a new file, and then I can select a document that I have. Right, now I do now get this error, right? So please add your Gemini API key to your environment variables, right? So what I have done basically is that in the code, I have an error that kind of is displayed when the environment variable is missing, right? So we are going to try to add these environment variables. Now, in order to add an environment variable to our Cloud Run service, we will need to go ahead to edit and deploy a new revision, right? Because we want to add something new to the application. So we are just going to start out first with the non-sensitive value that we need to add to our service, right? Now, this sensitive value is going to be the AI name. Right. So in the application code, I have an environment variable that is called AI name. Right. And so if the AI name is not there or is not provided, then the AI just says, I am not known. Right. So we want to kind of change that. So once we come to edit or deploy a new revision, you can just scroll down under the container section, and then you can just scroll to variables. You can just click on variables and secrets. Right. Now, this is where you can go ahead to add new variables, and you can also go ahead to add new secrets, right? Now, in our case, the AI name is not a sensitive value, so we can go ahead to add it as an environment variable, right? And not a secret, because that is a value that is okay to have as a public value, right? So we can go ahead to click on add environment variable, and then we go ahead to add that variable. So we'll say AI name, and then we'll give it a value, right? So we will call it maybe medoc, right? And then we'll go ahead to deploy a new version of the application. So this is where you specify the name of your variable, and then you specify any value that it should have. So we go ahead to deploy the application. So this will then create a new revision of the application with the environment variable set, and then it will basically transfer, 100% of the traffic to it. So if we come to our application again, and then we refresh, hopefully we should now see the AI name. Right. Now, this resolves the first issue, which is, adding an environment variable for our AI name. If we try to upload a file once more, we will still get that same error because the Gemini API key does not exist still, right? So we can go ahead to edit our service again. So we edit and deploy a new revision. And then we scroll down. Now we come under variables and secrets. So this is where we want to basically say that, okay, we want to add our Gemini API key, but this Gemini API key is secure information. We don't just want any user to be able to access it, right? So we are going to take advantage of Google Cloud Secret Manager, right? Now, Google Cloud Secret Manager is basically a service that allows you to store values that are secret, values that you want to keep, hidden from, any other user, right? So you can either create regional secrets or you can create global secrets, right? So regional secrets are more or less secrets that are stored in a certain region. So as you can see here, you can see some regional secrets right here, right? And you can have global secrets, which are basically stored, and replicated in multiple regions by Google Cloud, right? So we can go ahead to create a new secret, right? So in our case, we'll go ahead to click on create secret, and then we will name it Gemini API key. Right, now you can upload a file, you can enter some secret value. In our situation, I will just go ahead to just get the secret value from here. And then I'll just paste that, right? So this is the value of the secret, right? This is my Gemini API key. And then I'll go ahead to either dictate if you want to manually specify what the location of the secret should be. So let's just say you want to store it in certain regions, right? So because this is a global secret, I am able to select more than one region where I want the secret to be stored. If it was a regional secret, then I only have to specify a single region, right? But if I wanted to replicate it in multiple, then I can go ahead and select the specific regions, or I can just let Google manually replicate that for me, right? And so I don't need to manage the locations myself. So I can leave that off, and then I can go ahead to create the secret. So this will then go ahead to create my global secret, and then it will add a new version, right? Now, how a user will be able to access the application is through permissions, right? So if you come over here and then you look at the permissions, you will see that by default, the service account with the role of editor has access to it, right? I, being the owner of this project, I also have access to it. There is another service account that has secret manager admin role. That service account also has access to it. And so in this way, you are able to limit those who can interact with your secret, right? Because the person has to have some role in that particular secret in order for them to be able to access it, right? So we will go ahead to deploy a new revision. Let's just try this once more. We'll go ahead to deploy a new revision where we can add our new secret. So we can click on variables and secrets. Our AI name is still there. And then we can decide to reference a secret, right? So what Google Cloud will do is that basically it will provide your secret's value as an environment variable to your application. So your application will be able to access this as if it is actually an environment variable set up in your .env file, right? So we can go ahead to say reference a secret, and then we can give the secret a name. Of course, we know the name is Gemini API key, right? But this can be any value at all based on your application. And then we can go ahead to choose the secret, right? Google Cloud also gives you the convenience of being able to create a new secret directly from here. So if you click on this, it would also give you a similar option to kind of go ahead to create the secret, right? But since we have already created a secret, we can try to search for it. Let me see. So we called it what? Gemini API key. So this is it, right? Now, when you create your secret, you can basically have multiple versions of that secret, right? So right now, what I have should be, let's just see, or let me see, versions. What I have should be just the version 1 of the secret, right? I can try to click here to view the secret value, right? So I can see the value here because I have the permissions, but another user who does not have the permission will not be able to see the secret, right? So you can then add more versions or a new version, right? So I can create a new version and then maybe give it a different value, right? And then I can go ahead to add a new version, right? So when you are deploying your cloud and service, Google Cloud gives you the opportunity to choose between selecting a specific version or always pointing your environment variable to the latest value of the secret. So what that means is basically if I select latest here, right, and later on I go ahead to update the secret by adding a new version, my service will always point to the latest one, right? But if I go ahead to specify a specific version, then my service will always point to that version. Right. So based on your application requirements, you can make the best decision whether you should stick to the latest or you should stick to a specific version. Right. I will stick to the latest for now. Right. Now, by doing this, I should be done with, referencing my secret, and then let's just click on done, and then let's just try to deploy the application. So let us see what happens. Now you can see we have an error here, right? Because our service account does not have access to the secret, right? So we need to go ahead to add our service account to the secret. So I'll go ahead to come to our, so on the secrets page, I'll just go ahead to click on permissions, right? And I need to now grant access to our application service account. So I will just go over here and I'll just copy the email right here, right? I'll just copy that email and then I'll click on new principals. I'll just enter that email there, right? And then I'll go ahead to assign a role. So the role it needs here is just secret manager assessor, right? So secret, it just needs to access that secret. It doesn't need more permissions. It doesn't need permission to create a new secret version. It just needs to be able to read the secret value. So I'll just come to secret manager and then I'll look for a role that does exactly that, which is secret manager, secret assessor, right? So it allows accessing the payload of the secret. That is what I want, right? Because the service only needs to read the value. It does not need to create a new version or anything like that. Unless my application was actually managing the secret, but my application is not doing that. It just needs to read the value. So I'll just go ahead to say secret manager. And in a few seconds, I should be able to try redeploying the application again. So I'll click on edit and deploy a new version. Let us come back to variables and secrets. So the environment variable we reference is still showing over there. So we can go ahead to click on deploy once more. Hopefully this should work. Right. So now I've given the service account that is attached to my Cloud Run service access to the secret. So now the deployment works successfully. Let's now try out the application once more. So let's refresh the page and then let's go ahead to just upload a new file. So we are uploading our document. Right. So now you can see we don't get in the error anymore. So we can go ahead to ask a question about the document. So I would just say something like, if I have a user with the name, let's just say Joe, how can I add that user to my users table? Right. So the AI has then given me a response. Insert into users into bracket name values Joe. Right. This response is basically coming from the document. So if I try to ask any question outside of the document, it will not be able to give me the answer. So let's just say, what is the current time? Let's try to ask a question like that. Right. So the document does not contain this information. Right. Can you, let's just say, summarize the document? Let's just say summarize the document. And the AI will then give me a summary of what the document is, which is a cheat sheet for SQL operations and such. Right. So basically, you can manage service account, you can manage environment variables that are attached to your service by deploying a new version under containers, just going to environment variables and secrets, and then selecting either to add an environment variable, which should be plain text, or to add or expose secrets as environment variables, right? Now, when exposing secrets as environment variables, if you want to also access your secrets, there is another option that you can access your secrets through. I'll just mention this briefly, and that is through volume mount, right? So if you go to the volume tab, you should be able to add a new volume, right? And then you say, okay, this volume is of type secret, right? And then you give it some name. So let's just say Gemini API key, right? And then you specify the secret. So in our case, we just say the Gemini API key, right? And then you will now specify, the secret. You will now specify the path. So let's just say I want the secret to be available under the path. Let's just say /app, right? So let's just say app slash API key, right? So I want it to be available under app slash API key, and I'll say done. So now I've added this volume, which is basically going to kind of have that secret. So I can then go to my containers tab, and then I can scroll to my variables and secrets. Sorry, I can scroll to my volumes and mount, yes. And I can basically mount the volume. So I can select that volume, right? And then I can go ahead to decide where I want to mount that volume, right? So maybe up, right? So you can see now that this is where my Gemini API key will be stored, right? So if you use such a method, then you are no longer accessing the Gemini API key or your secrets through environment variable, but you are accessing your secrets through a volume mount. And so you would use something like your file system tools in your programming language to basically read the file from this location, right? And then perform your operations on it, right? But of course, you wouldn't necessarily want to be making changes to it, right? Because Cloud Run instances are ephemeral, and so they will be created and then they will be destroyed. So you wouldn't necessarily want to be making changes to it or to this volume, but basically you would want to be just reading from it, right? So you just read the value from it, right? And so that is how you can also add secrets by using volume mount. That is, if you have a use case for that, where you need to rather, instead of reading the secret from an environment variable, you need to rather read it from the file system, then you can go ahead to add it as a volume mount on a specific path, and then you can read that file from that path, right? So that is how you can manage environment variables and secrets. Join me on another time on this journey as we continue from next week. Thank you.